Hi, everyone, and welcome to another exciting session of the Human and Sports Performance Series. I'm your host, Anthony Smalls. Today, we have two guest speakers. We have Kate Martino and Lindsey Scarmozzino. They're here to talk about performance psychology. So I hope you're ready to get some of this good information because it's going to be a stellar session. Take it away, ladies.
All right, we're going to continue with the hype there. Live up to your energy. I'm Kate Martino. It's my partner, Lindsey, and we are part of the Inspire Wellness Sports Psychology team. And we're excited to be here today. We're representing a group practice called Inspire Wellness. We have locations in Glen Rock, Tenafly, and Ramsey, New Jersey. And we have clinicians that are licensed in both New Jersey and New York who provide mental performance services as well as just mental health services. So we're excited to talk to you guys today, and we'll get the ball rolling here with our presentation.
Yes, thank you for having us. We're just going to share it first and then we'll get started.
So I'll keep it brief on myself and then pass it over to Lindsey, but I'm a clinical and sport therapist. I have a background as an athlete myself. I grew up in Summit, New Jersey, and played soccer, basketball, and lacrosse. And I ended up playing Division I lacrosse in college. I went to the University of North Carolina, where I was a part of a national championship team my freshman year. And I understood at that point kind of the pressures of both the physical and mental game. And UNC was not the right fit for me. So I ended up making a change to a small college in Massachusetts called Holy Cross. And I continued to play there, dealt with injuries along the way. And at the time, there was no one on campus to really help student athletes with the mental side of the game. And that's something that interested me. And I really wanted to become that support for athletes now. So that's kind of how I got into the field of sports psych. I'll throw it to Lindsey now.
Yes, thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. My name is Lindsey. I'm a clinical and sport therapist intern with Inspire Wellness. I am currently earning my master's degree from there. I also played sports growing up. So I grew up in New Jersey and played soccer and basketball throughout my career and was a gymnast for a very long time. I played college at a Division I college in New York at first, then transferred to a Division III school where I now currently coach as well. So my interest from sports psych kind of stemmed actually from my coaching experience. So being an athlete and then transitioning into a collegiate coach, kind of a similar experience to Kate, found that there was a gap in the services that athletes were provided on a day-to-day basis, and that they weren't provided. And that's kind of where sports psych and mental health services kind of fell in my life. So that's what got me interested in the field as well.
So what we do at Inspire Wellness, we provide services, the skills, and then also work with teams. So as I said earlier, we're a group practice with 3 different locations in New Jersey, with clinicians licensed in both New Jersey and New York. And then we can also provide telehealth therapy. So some of the services include individual one-on-one counseling, group counseling, team and coaching workshops, and then needs assessments. So we've had, soccer clubs, lacrosse clubs reach out to us just to assess what their needs are within the club, how we can help their coaches progress, how we can help their players progress. So that's a role that we've found in Bergen County, New Jersey. Some of the skills we provide: coping skills, cognitive behavioral therapy, attention to detail and helping people focus. We also have biofeedback, which helps with that, positive self-talk, visualization, mindfulness, and psychoed. So these are all things, a few of them we're actually going to hit on today and explain in a little bit more detail. And then lastly, team dynamics. So we do team evaluations, leadership coaching, team building, culture development, all things that we've done with high schools, colleges, as well as professional teams. We've had the pleasure of working with the Brooklyn Nets. We consult with the New York Jets at times too. So we've had the opportunity to work with, whether it's an elite youth athlete all the way to the elitist of the professional players in the world. And similar to coaches, how they have a game plan, we like to describe a little bit of a game plan of how we're going to operate today in this presentation. We also like to check things off. So the first three that we've got, and our only three, are first, sports psychology overview. So I'm going to provide a little bit of education on performance from a psychological lens. The second is resilience in sport, and Lindsey will speak to this, and she'll help you build that bounce back muscle in terms of facing adversity. And then lastly, goal setting. We're going to use goal setting as a tool and strategy to develop resiliency. Now, we wanted to throw it out there, and if you're not currently on, you can listen through the websites, but how important is the mental element of your sport? And we got one participant, so I'm going to put him on the spot if he's willing.
Very important. I played baseball in college, and I feel like I actually really would have benefited from like sports psych, stuff like that, just kind of reframing my mindset. And I feel like if I would have been stronger mentally, or at least if I had better like coping mechanisms, I think that things would have been a lot better, like with my actual like physical play on the field too. So I'd say it's like critical.
Yeah, it's highly critical. And I think there's a Yogi Berra quote that says baseball is 90% mental, the other half is physical. Yet I wonder, you know, so many athletes dedicate working on their physical bodies per week. You know, I recently had a college athlete in here, and she said, we've got lift 3 times a week. We've got practice every day for 2+ hours a day. The amount of hours they spend on that versus, well, what are you doing to work on your mental well-being, the way you handle pressure, your mental health in general? And that is so limited. And thankfully, this day and age, we're growing in that area. But Lindsey and I definitely want to raise some awareness around that and build some of that mental toughness for you guys. And I'm going to play this video in a minute, but it's Klay Thompson. And as many of us know, he suffered torn Achilles, torn ACL. He's dealt with some of the worst injuries in terms of performance. And this is a video of him after winning the championship this past season. And I just want you to pay attention to maybe the emotion that he's showing throughout the video. So we're going to play about a minute of it.
Emotions come to mind after this moment?
A lot of mixed ones, to be honest. I mean, 2019, it was easier to accept because I'd never been hurt before, and that 5-year run took a lot out of us. But the second time it happened, it was like, what the heck is going on, man? And just to stay with it, do the most, just a calf raise after underwater treadmill, so many days, not even touching a ball. Then to go through this season with the ups and downs and even these playoffs, I mean, I'm just at a loss for words at times because I just knew this was possible, but to be here in real time, man, I don't want to leave. I just want to enjoy every second of this. I know how fleeting it can be.
So if we go to the next slide, I'll speak to it a little bit more. What he's explaining in that moment is the depths of dealing with a physical injury, having to come back from 2 injuries, pretty severe injuries. And I think on the outside, the media sometimes portrays this line of success to be just this straight line up. And we see these athletes at the top of their game, but we don't see what it really looks like, which is this squiggly line of the ups and the downs. And sometimes these ups and downs happen within a day. Sometimes they happen within years. But what Klay is speaking to is how he dealt with the downs, right? And now he's at a point where he really was cherishing this moment at the top. because he knows how fleeting it is. It rarely happens, but when you get there, it's a great, great feeling. So he's trying to cherish that. And I think the point of our presentation today is to help people deal with those downward spirals, right? We want you to bounce back from those moments a little bit quicker. And we just want to normalize too. These are some of the best professional athletes in the world. We always like to include this slide. You'll find Kevin Love on the left-hand corner, who's dealt with depression as a child. He talks openly about having panic attacks during games that literally felt like a heart attack for him. And so he's been very outspoken about his mental health struggles. Then I also love Colin Wilson's story on the top right, professional hockey player who dealt with addiction and really severe OCD to the point where he had this obsession of tying and retying his laces on his skates until his fingers started to bleed because his brain was just telling him to compulsively tie them. So despite these disorders, these people still performed and continue to perform. So that's the key, right? Somehow they work through it and continue to show up every day. That's the goal. So Lindsey and I and other clinicians here at Inspire, this is kind of the spectrum of what we work with. Sometimes, unfortunately, we get athletes, professionals, whether you be a nurse, a doctor, police officer, or athlete, come in who's severely functionally impaired, right? For example, I might have a young kid come in who's already having panic attacks, right? And let's say, I'm just going to give an example. He's a golfer and he's really struggling to make it through even, 9 holes. So by the 9th hole, he's having that panic attack, really struggling. Our goal in our work together is to get him slowly to hole 10, to hole 11, right? Learn to cope with any sort of stressor or negative thought that pops into his brain, with the ultimate goal of having people thrive and reach a level of resilience. So we do the whole spectrum. Sometimes people start somewhere and end somewhere. It's a constant ebb and flow, and this will happen throughout everybody's life. It's not subjective to one person. And to be even more specific, so our goal is to help people overcome life and sport adversity. Our true goal is to just help people become the best versions of themselves. So some of the things and adversities they might face are injury recovery, perfectionism, difficulty in relationships, performance anxiety, mental blocks. We see that actually a lot with baseball players, fear of failure. For student athletes in particular, this tough balance between academics and athletics, and then building those coping skills. And how we do that is through providing them the mental preparation, developing their routines and their habits, helping them develop a growth mindset instead of this fixed mindset, developing their focus, their motivation, confidence. And we can do that also through mental imagery or meditation. So we're going to check off the first piece of the game plan here. That's performance from a psychological lens. And we're going to shift gears into resilience.
Yeah, so just to start and jump in on resilience theory, we won't go totally into all the nitty gritty of it, but to give a little bit of a definition, resiliency, if you Google the word, right, the definition that comes up is the capacity to bend without breaking, to return to an original shape or condition. So this concept was actually first for objects, right? Thinking about a rubber band. If you stretch a rubber band to its thinnest possible point and then let it go, it's able to bounce back into its original smaller oval shape, right? That beginning shape. And researchers years and years ago said, hey, that could be interesting if we apply this towards human nature. There could be something there. And more of a human perspective definition is the ability to bounce back and thrive in the face of life's many inevitable challenges. So thrive is a key word that we're going to talk about in a little bit. But again, it's this concept of being bent in different ways, right? Those are the challenges, the life stressors, things that happen that are out of our control. How do we bounce back from those and how do we respond to them? That's essentially what resilience theory is trying to explain and what resiliency is. So again, the research was developed through a few different studies. Two key ones that we wanted to talk about today was with POWs, which is prisoners of war from the Vietnam War. That was one large study. And the second was a study with civilians that endured intense trauma and how they responded. And they, the researchers wanted to find different themes within these groups of people of like, how did they survive this? How did they get through this and not only survive it, then respond and continue on and have success in their life? And two things that they found from this study was interpersonal connection and control. So, and those are two things that are later developed and we're actually going to touch on in a little bit, that were further defined as self-mastery and social support. And through the study with the prisoners of war and the individuals, the civilians who endured trauma, whether that was abuse from a loved one, a parent or spouse, or severe weather conditions like a severe hurricane that took homes, family members, that type of trauma that was studied. Those were the two themes that came out. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. But at Inspire, when we work with our clients looking through resiliency, we use this kind of 3-step mantra, if you will, of survive, recover, and thrive. So first, survive, right? That's just get through it, right? Handle it in terms of just being there, kind of getting through the moment. Then that recover section is when the coping skills come in, right? That's recovering. We're responding to what happened. Those are the skills we try and build upon with our clients. And then the third is that thriving element, the ability to learn, to grow, to change from different mistakes that we make and hardships that we face. Because within our life, right, it's not a matter of if these things happen, right? As athletes, we know you're going to make a mistake. It's when we make a mistake, when we go through stressful things, right? With athletes, especially college athletes, it's the balance of athletics and academics, or athletics and things going on in your life, right? You're an entire individual in addition to being a student athlete. And the last piece just to touch on here is that we want to encourage people to make an effort to build your resilience muscle. This isn't something that, we have to wait to go through trauma or stress to work on and then, see what happens, right? Leave it up to chance. That's not really the case, right? We can have tools and strategies to be preventative for when this happens, I'm prepared. And that's what we call building that resilience muscle. So some ways we do this on this next slide, we have a little assessment that we just want to give like 2 or 3 minutes to take a look at. So these 6 different line items, I hope you can see them or read them well on your screen, but they're all kind of saying the same thing in different ways. But whether you have a piece of paper and a pen near you, or if you're like a mega mind, you can do it in your head, that's great, or even on your phone. What we want to do with this brief resilience scale is read each line item and score it. And then once we get those 6 different scores, add them up and divide it by 6. That will give us our resiliency score. So we just wanted to provide this little tangible assessment for each of us to do individually. I won't ask you to share your score, don't worry. But the way it would work is, you say, okay, I tend to bounce back quickly after hard times. You think to yourself, okay, that sounds like me. I do feel like I tend to bounce back pretty quickly after hard times, but I'm not perfect at it. So it would be agree, right? So that would be a 4. Then I have a hard time making it through stressful events. Say to yourself, okay, maybe sometimes yes, sometimes no. Maybe we would go in that neutral category, which would be a number 3. So on and so forth for the rest of the line items. And we would add all those up, right? 4 plus 3 plus 3 plus 2 plus 4, right? So on and so forth. And then divide that by 6. So if we just want to just give like 2 minutes to do that really quickly. Again, I won't ask you for your score, but I'll give you some time to go through that. All right. Hopefully that was enough time for people. I know we have a couple people on right now, but even for those watching at home, you could probably even pause it and do that as well. So we'll go through. So usually scores will fall between 2 and 4. That's kind of average scores, but I wanted to go through what this scoring even means, right? So scores from 1.0 to 2.9 are in the low category. That's a low resiliency score. From 3.0 to 4.3 is average resiliency score, and a high is 4.31 to a 5.0. 5.0 is the highest possible score. And the way we can kind of think about this, so this lower score, the 1.0 to 2.9, we're thinking about that survive stage, right? In that 3 tier that we were talking about earlier, we're just getting through it, right? We're just trying to make it day by day. That average score, the 3.0 to 4.3, that's our recover, right? We have some coping skills, we have some, coping mechanisms that work for us. Maybe they don't always work, it depends on the day. That's that recovery stage. And lastly, that high resiliency score, the 4.31 to 5.0, that's that thriving. We've gained skills that work well for us. We know when to tap into them and utilize them. And we're able to, if something happens to us that feels bigger than something we've experienced previously, we're able to gain new resiliency skills and have that bounce back mentality. So hopefully that made it a little bit more individualized to what we were doing. You can think about your scores and kind of where you fall in those categories, and then, working from there as the kind of scale that Kate showed earlier in terms of the different stages that people go through in life, right? You could be going through things that are really tough right now. And our goal through this presentation, through the work that we would do at Inspire, right, is to kind of just move along that spectrum slowly but surely. And moving forward here, those 2 critical factors, right? So now we have our score. How do we get from that low category to the average category, or average to high, or, staying in that high category? 2 factors were self-mastery. So that's the degree to which you perceive yourself as having control and influence over circumstance. Control is a big piece within resiliency, how much we feel we're in control of what's going to happen to us next. And the second piece is social support. So the degree to which you perceive you're cared for and receiving help from other people. So some coping skills that kind of fit under these 2 umbrella terms within that self-mastery category. And a really important piece is optimism. And on top of that, realistic optimism, right? We don't want to be a blind optimist that just jumps in and thinks, oh, everything's going to be butterflies and rainbows all the time, right? That's not realistic. But being able to focus on being effective, being able to see the bigger picture, that's part of that self-mastery, right? Okay, maybe I'm going through a really tough time right now, but I'm able to focus and control my focus on that larger picture. How do I get to where I want to be? And goal setting is a big piece of that Kate's going to touch on next. Some other coping skills that we would work on in self-mastery are being able to confront fear. That's something that people usually tend to shy away from. And athletes sometimes have a little bit of a leg up on that, right? We have to jump into fearful situations at all different times. So being able to lean into those fears and confront them helps us feel more in control, helps us perceive that we have more self-mastery, and acceptance is another piece of that. On the social support side, getting comfortable asking for help is probably tip number 1, right? A lot of times, especially high achievers, athletes kind of fall in that category. It's really hard for us to say, hey, I'm going through a tough time. I need for help. I need some help. Practicing that is really effective. And that's when you realize, oh, wow, I do have some social support. There are people standing behind me in my corner. And then in addition to support from people, there's other things we can connect to as well that helps our social support. Things like faith, a larger purpose, a community, a team, right? Things like that can add to our social support as well. So thinking about those 2 things, I'm going to put you guys on the spot again, just for a little bit of participation. So Isaiah, I'm calling you out again. Thinking about baseball, what do you think are things that are in your control that kind of feed into that self-mastery aspect? What do you think?
I would say the effort that I put in each day on the field and in the weight room is mostly within my control.
Totally.
I guess my reaction to things that happen on the field is also in my control. And then the, I guess, attitude with which I approach, like at bats, for example, walking up to the plate, I can control all of that for the most part. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You touched on some really key points. Effort is a big one, right? That's something that's totally in your control day in and day out, and your responses to things. Those are, whether that's approaching an at bat, whether that's adversity that comes your way, right? That we've been talking about this whole time. You're absolutely right about those two. And then this next piece, social support, without getting too personal, don't feel like you need to share your personal life, but what are some examples of social support that you can touch on?
I would say family, my teammates for sure. Sometimes coaches. I guess that kind of depends on the relationship.
I hear you on that, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. You really touched on our examples, which are great. So just to go, back you up really there, some self-mastery applied to sport or physical fitness, right? I think you touched on that a little bit in terms of getting into the weight room. And on top of that, in terms of working out, things like proper nutrition, prioritizing sleep. Those are other things within our physical body that are totally in our control. And then another piece, sport-specific skills and abilities, right? So the amount of times we work on throwing mechanics and, swinging mechanics, things along those lines, stick skills for lacrosse players, footwork for soccer players. Those are in our control, right? The amount we practice that outside of our scheduled practice time. And our mental preparation, right? To be able to enhance confidence, keep that positive, optimistic attitude that we were talking about a little bit earlier, similar to your response to things that you touched on. And then again, just some examples of social support, family, friends, teammates, people that are effective in our lives that help us feel supported, are people that we can lean on when we face these moments where we need to be resilient. And a spiritual connection for some people, being able to meditate, religious or non-religious prayer, having mindfulness activities that can really help ground us and feel a larger connection. And lastly, community. Everyone is part of a community, whether they feel like they know it or not. Some people that's stronger than others, but we just wanted to give some examples there for social support. So again, we like checking things off of our checklist. So that was our resilience in sport. And Kate is going to shift into goal setting.
So we're going to use goal setting as our one tool today. And there's many tools that you can use to build resilience. We're just focusing on goal setting. Some other things might be self-talk, motivation. There's different mindfulness. Any of those things will also build resilience, but today's focus is setting goals. So why do we even set goals for things? But the key question is, to answer that question, is because they give us a sense of purpose and control over what we're doing. It gives us a plan, and having a process for what we want to achieve is essential. If it helps you know what you want to achieve, why you want to achieve it, and gives you the steps of how to get there. I love this fourth point of prioritize what is important. We see so many young kids now where, they actually write down the amount of hours a day that they're doing certain activities. And the highest is always on their phone, looking at social media, mostly sometimes wasting time, right? And that's usually right before bed, which is then affecting how they sleep. And this goes back to what is really important for these kids. And I like to use the acronym WIN, W-I-N, what's important now. Right then and there before bed, I would hope that they can kind of shift gears, learn to unwind, put away the phone, get less screen time, and focus on recovery, right? But that's a pipe dream for a lot of kids these days. but that's truly what's important. And I think the more you can work towards that, the better. And then lastly, you can identify the benefits of working towards your goals. There's always a benefit to have something to work towards. So by definition and research, goals are creating an action plan, and they're designed to motivate and guide a person, a team, a group toward a common goal. There are skills that need to be learned and practiced, and the more specific you can be with these goals, the better. And then the last point is goal proximity. You want to think about ways where you're getting close to the goal or further away. And I want to focus on this last point for a minute. There's so many distractions now, and a lot of distractions we see amongst high schoolers, whether it be the phone or social media, addictive, risky behaviors with drugs and alcohol. But if you have a goal in mind and you identify that goal, you really need to start to see if your behaviors are aligning with that goal, and ask yourself, are the behaviors I'm engaging in moving me towards that goal or away from that goal? And, I have athletes too that go to bed at 9 o'clock, put the phone away, and want to achieve a certain goal, and they follow through. It's a choice. And I think the more you can realize you have a choice over how you behave and how close you want to become to that goal, the more power you have. Now, I'm just going to lay out kind of different types of goals. The key one we're going to focus on today are smarter goals: specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, timely, extending, and revised. So that's as specific as you can get in terms of setting a goal. Then there's long-term and short-term goals. So we get a lot of kids that come in and say long-term team goal, let's say, is to win a state championship. Short-term goal is to win the county tournament, right? Because that's sooner. But what we really want to work on is, okay, what are you going to do as a team? And how are you going to play your role as an individual to get to that goal? Because the outcome is not always controllable. So that's kind of an example of a team plus individual goals. And then lastly, ink it, don't just think it. There's research that proves that if you actually write down your goal, you're more likely to achieve it. And I remember watching this video of a national championship wrestler, and he won the NCAAs, and he said something like, I wrote down on my mirror, I'm going to win this year. And every day he was looking at that, right? You're working towards this goal. And, wrestlers have a goal in mind, whether it's their weight or winning. And if you could create a process to get there, you're more likely to achieve the end result you want. So we're going to distinguish a little bit more in depth about process versus outcome goals. And what I like to suggest is think of the bigger picture first. Think of the outcome in your sport, in your relationships, in school, the outcome that you want to achieve. For some people, it's, I want to play this sport in college. I want to get into this school. I want to make varsity this year. That's an individual example. So once you think of that outcome, then we're going to shift back to the process. The process is the controllable piece that you can do on a daily basis to move you towards that goal. So process goals are goals that state what an athlete will do to improve on the areas to lead to their desired performance. So for example, an individual who has the goal of, let's say, making varsity this year, they could set the process goal of, I will increase my stick handling skills by completing one extra drill prior to or after practice. And I just worked through this with a young basketball player, and her goal as a freshman is to make varsity on the basketball team. But in order to do that, right, she has to get involved with the team now in the summer and make connections already. So that's kind of a process goal that's going to help her. She's playing in these tournament games now. It's going to give her experience. It's an opportunity to grow that can help her reach the next level. Sometimes you got to lean into the discomfort there to reach the goal. A team example might be to finish in first in the division, and a very specific measurable goal you can have in that scenario would be, overall, let's improve our overall team shooting percentage by 5%. In terms of basketball too, I love setting goals around free throw shooting percentages. I think Villanova always, or at least last year, had the highest free throw shooting percentage as a team. And that's something that they totally focused on and could control, and it helped them in the end. So that's more of a team example.
Yeah, and just an activity, we have a worksheet that we wanted to present. Feel free to screenshot it, to take a photo of it in different ways. It's just another useful tool to help break up the process of creating goals, right? As Kate mentioned earlier, it's a skill that needs to be practiced, right? Just like being resilient, it's something that we need to do repetitively and consistently to be able to master it. So we broke down each letter of the smarter goals, right? Usually people know SMART goals. That's kind of become pretty popular, and smarter is even better, right? Even smarter. So we're just going to go through each letter, and then on the next slide, we have an example that we can just break down quickly. So again, the S is specific. What do I want to happen, right? As Kate mentioned earlier, sometimes it's easier to look at that bigger picture and then break it up into the smaller pieces. So what do I want to happen? I want to improve my play. I want to get more playing time. I want to make varsity, right? Things along those lines. Then the M is measurable. How will I know when I have achieved my goal? This is a really key piece that sometimes we forget about, right? We have this goal, it's this thing we want to achieve, but how am I going to get there? And how will I know when I get there? Sometimes we can lose sight of that along in the journey. So it's important to write that down to make it apparent. And A is for attainable. Is this goal realistic, and how will I accomplish it, right? This adds to that specificity piece of, can I even do this, right? Am I shooting for something outside of my skill set completely? Or if not, if it is more realistic, how can I get there? What are the specific steps? R is for relevant. Why is this important to me? This is another key piece that sometimes we lose sight of, especially on those days when we wake up and I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to do extra practice. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I have 700 things to do, right? This is the piece to remind ourselves, oh yeah, I'm passionate about this. This has a larger effect on me than just, simply completing one task. Why is it important? The T is for timely. What's the deadline for the goal, right? Is this a super far out long-term goal? Is this the shorter term goal, right? What's that time piece? Then the E can be switched out a couple times for a few different words, but evaluated is the one we like to use. And this is when and how will I review and reflect on my goal? This is an important one that also gets, a little bit lost along the way, because sometimes we set a goal and we either achieve it or we don't. And that's that. But that's not really the case, right? When we're taking steps to work towards this goal, we can also then adjust it a little to be more attainable, to be more relevant, to be more timely, right? And it's almost necessary that we do that, because on the other side, right, we could say, oh yeah, I'm right on track. The things that I planned for are working, and I'm going to achieve this goal by the time that I want, which is great. That last one is revised. Does my goal need to be edited in some way, right? Those two are connected to make that smarter goal. And we just wanted to give this example, right? This is just one example we've had with an athlete that we've worked with. And that top piece where you lay out your goal, that's kind of the end, actually, right? We work through all of the letters, then we get this nice, specific, measurable, attainable, so on and so forth goal, right? So this would be, my goal is to improve my stick skills by diminishing my dropped passes in practices and games. To achieve this goal, I'll practice against the wall 3 times a week for 30 minutes each. And so after we've gone through all of these steps, that's that larger goal that we can set for ourselves. I'll give you a minute just to look at this slide to read through each letter, what we filled in there for this athlete. And one I just want to point out is that relevancy piece, right? It will build my confidence as a member of the team. that brings us back to that community, that connection that we feel, right? Is it really about improving my stick skills? Yes, to a certain extent, but also it's about who I am as an athlete, right? I want to feel more confident. I want to feel like a member of the team. That's that larger purpose that we're connecting to. So again, that's just one example there. And that's the last piece of our checkbox. So I know we did want to leave some time for a question and answer. If you guys do have anything, please feel free to, shout out a question or throw it in the chat. We'll also have our email for those that are just watching virtually at the end. Please feel free to contact us. Kate will talk about that in a little bit. Oh, Isaiah, I think I can see your hand raised. Sorry, the participant's a little funky with me sharing my screen, but if you do have your hand raised, feel free.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you for that presentation. It was really great. This is a very interesting topic, and I feel like I kind of alluded to this earlier, but I feel like if I would have had something like this when I was younger, it could have been really beneficial to me just growing up as a person, especially as an athlete, student athlete, but even just as a person. Like, do you know if there's kind of a push to expand services like this for young athletes, or like what's the accessibility like?
That's a great question, and something we're working towards every day is that accessibility. Kate, do you want to jump in, or do you want me to take it?
I'll jump in. I think there's a push for it for sure. We're seeing now that a lot of college campuses are hiring on-campus sports psychologists, at least 1 or 2 people to be there. There's less of a push, I would say, in the high school or youth sports, youth who probably need it the most, as well as part of our role has been educating parents. So how to really help your kid through maybe anxious times or performance pressures. So I think there's been more of a push just because of social media, and people are more open to talking about it, especially after Simone Biles came out and talked about everything she went through. But I think it'll be a continuous thing throughout our lives to really just get the word out there. What do you think, Lindsey?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I'm starting to see almost this trickle down effect where we have this generation of athletes that went through and humans in general, I should say, performers in general, who went through their time of performance, right? Let's just use an athlete who went through youth sports, high school to collegiate to even professional or not, went through this experience. And now they're realizing, right, similar to as you were describing, Isaiah, is like, oh man, I really wish I had this. I want this for the next generation because it can benefit. So now it's like trickling down. Okay, let's start with the college level, right? And our hope, for our profession is that it continues to trickle down into high school, into youth sports, into rec sports, because kids, right, they're the most malleable. Those are the athletes who can really, really benefit. Not to say that any athlete or performer can't benefit, but, in youth sports where it's highly competitive and it's getting even more competitive, even at the high school level as well, hopefully it continues to kind of have that trickle down effect that becomes, yes, more acceptable, but I think even more so accepted. And it's not, oh, I'm embarrassed to talk about these things that I'm going through. It's, yeah, I'm going through it, and so is my teammate next to me. Like, let's work on this together. I think that's kind of the end goal and hope for mental health in general.
Thank you.
Okay, I had a question. In the times of social media, do you think it plays into a player's performance more nowadays than compared to players of the past? Do you think they would have had the same mental roadblocks if they had social media in their times of playing?
I think about one positive aspect. There's multiple of social media. Do you see the movie Hustle with Adam Sandler? Right? Like,
Yes,
so
I
this,
did.
yeah, this player who was pushing to get recognized was not recognized until, he became TikTok famous and all this stuff. But there's a lot of truth to that in terms of you can show your skill through this social platform. And I think it also gets you connected to certain trainers. I've had athletes that, are able to train with some of the best basketball trainers in the world because they DM them on Instagram, right? So there's that potential there that wasn't there when I was in high school or, 10, 15 years ago. To the detriment of these kids, I think it's more in terms of, and I can only speak to what we've seen in our practice, is the impact on mental health and well-being that social media has. And in my belief, it's, if you're not feeling great off the field or off the court, that's going to affect on the court too, inevitably. So I would say there's a lot of depression, eating disorders that stem from social media that can then really affect someone's performance in school and in sport.
Yeah, I agree with that as well. I think, with everything in life, right, there's pros and cons. And I think social media is one of the biggest examples of it's how you respond to it. Take the example of, right, when I was in high school competing, I didn't know what people, right, I grew up in New Jersey. I didn't even know what athletes in New York were doing, let alone California, across the country, right? I have athletes that come in and it's like, oh, well, this one who's, also 15 like me is training 7 days a week, doing X, Y, and Z, all this stuff. I'm not doing that. Does that mean I'm not good enough? Right? Like there's a piece of that can be detrimental. Then I have another athlete who comes in, right, and says like, oh, this one in Texas is doing X, Y, and Z. I got this great idea. And now I'm doing it too. And it's really helping me, right? So it's how we respond to different things, and much easier said than done, right? I don't mean to minimize it at all, but the response to social media, I think what's on our social media and how long we're viewing it is really, really important. And the ability to turn it off, to be able to make it an external thing that we can put away and say, this is me, this is who I am, this is what I'm doing, and it's enough, is really important. To also have the benefits of like, okay, I like to scroll, see what my friends are doing, right? Like there's a relaxed, distraction piece of it that is helpful. But again, it's all in the response, I would say.
I'm going to give a little shout out too, because I know there's a clinician who is establishing an app. Her name's Jennifer Libby, that encompasses all the social media platforms in one app, and it filters out any sort of danger, negativity, and it has kids connect through this app. It's supposed to come out, I believe, this coming year. Possibly, but has experience working with young adults who experience depression, anxiety, all because a lot of it stems from social media. So she's created this like positive environment and it's new for kids to go on and connect with others. So be on the lookout. It's called Promly. I'm going to give a little shout out there because I know when it does come out, I'm going to suggest my clients hop on there.
Yeah,
Thank you. I had another question. How important is it from your skill set to deliver messages to your clients that you work with or teams that you work with? How is it important for individuals to know how to deliver a specific message to a player or to a person to get a specific outcome? Because I feel like sometimes I've watched, because I used to play basketball when I was a kid as well. I played college basketball in Division III, and coaches tend to yell at players, all of them, but not knowing that one player might not, respond well to being yelled at, where some players actually, it gets them riled up to perform better. How important is that messaging?
I would say that's everything. We've luckily had the chance to do some coaching workshops to educate coaches on how to individualize their approach to athletes. So there's research out there now that this generation is even more sensitive, right? So you could say one thing and it might affect them and they might take it the wrong way. So some of our suggestions have been, why not schedule individual one-on-one meetings and just ask the athlete, how do you like to receive feedback? I want to motivate you, I want to push you, but I don't want it to be in a way that comes off negative. Some people I have plenty of athletes that like to be yelled at and it pushes them, right? Is it always sustainable? Maybe not, right? But in the moment it is. And then there's others that need, that positive reinforcement. is usually the most effective in terms of coaching. So, helping them work towards a common goal. I see you're smiling as I say that.
Yeah, just getting flashbacks of getting yelled at in college. That's all.
Yeah. The trauma.
So the next question I had is how does your one-on-one work with an athlete compare to your team teamwork? Because you might, as we just said in the previous question, want to deliver a message to this player in a certain way to get an outcome, but how does that affect the overall team goal? Do you have to do a little of both, or do you have to figure out how to schedule the one-on-one counseling with the team so that they're in alignment?
Want me to speak to that, Lindsey?
Yeah, go ahead. I can jump in after you.
Okay. So it's a little different with us because we're a private practice. So the main resource we provide is that one-on-one individual. If we work with a team, right, it's more short-term solution focused. We're providing an in-the-moment mental skill. For example, we did something recently on growth mindset and leaning into discomfort with a club lacrosse team. So we had them do this skit where they had to come up with an uncomfortable routine, do it in front of the group, experience that discomfort, and then transition that into how it's going to help them grow as team and build that connection. If what would happen is maybe one of them would feel connected to one of us and want that extra support, so they would meet with me or Lindsey separately outside of the team setting to get that. Lindsey, maybe you could speak more too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think with the way we work in the private practice, we know, whether it's an individual or a team that we're working with. I would say pretty rarely. I mean, it has happened a few times where we have individual members within a team that we're also working with. It does happen. But I think, going into those sessions, we have different goals, which was kind of one of your questions as well, right? For our individual sessions, they're structured a little bit differently than our team sessions. And the way we deliver that message, communication is key. So kind of touching on the last question as well, right? Even within our team sessions, we do a lot of interaction to have some individual connection as well. Either we'll put them into small groups, right? Break up that team to have multiple different avenues of communication, whether it's the whole team talking together, small groups based on position or age, if it's a high school team, things along those lines, I would say.
Thank you. I'll leave it to Isaiah if he has any more questions.
Do not.
Thanks for coming.
Okay. So that I will close it out with this final question that I had written down. Back in college, I was reading about the almost like the history of languages, and they were saying that the reason why you cast a spell, you speak it into existence. By spelling something out loud, you're creating something with the universe that's gonna like vibrate out into space and then come back to you to make it possible. How important is it to you for individuals, athletes to speak what they want into existence, write it down so that it actually becomes tangible in real life?
Yeah, I can jump in for that one. I think Kate touched on that earlier, right? When she said, ink it, don't just think it, which is sometimes, something we say every once in a while, but a lot of things go through our mind every single day, some helpful, some unhelpful, right? We can say a goal that we want in our mind. We can talk to ourselves. We're talking to ourselves pretty much all day long, whether we consciously realize it or not. And that simple act of just saying something out loud has this effect of making it feel a little bit more real, and writing it down to be able to look at it as well, like separate from yourself, from your own mind, can be really powerful for the simple fact of making it an external thing, as opposed to just one thought that passes through your mind in addition to 1,000 others during the day. It can be powerful to be able to look at something and say like, oh yeah, this was so important. I took it out of that jumble of 1,000 thoughts I have throughout the day and took the time to write it and remind myself of it each day that comes. It can make something feel a little bit more real than just the thoughts in our mind. Kate, do you have anything else to add on to that?
I think the only thing I would add is there's a theme of people saying, oh, I always jump to the negative. I always criticize myself first, right? I'm my own worst critic. And everyone does that. There's nothing wrong with that person for doing that. They're probably a better athlete because they push themselves and they want to get better because of that. But what happens is it takes a toll on us mentally. So if you can start to really place your focus and choose to focus on good things you're doing in your sport or in life. For example, something Lindsey and I do with clients, right, is after a game, we want you to write down, okay, the first 2 things you identify after a game, 2 things you did well today. It could have been, oh, I showed up to the game 15 minutes early today and, I chatted with my friend. Okay. Or it could have been, I had, an RBI in the game. And then identify the 2 things and only 1 thing you want to improve on. Right. So the ratio is good, a little bit higher on the good than it is the improvement. And it's not a bad, it's just an improvement. It's a learning experience. And there's a good book too. It's called The 4 Agreements. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's kind of speaks to that in terms of don't put the negativity out there because you'll get negativity in return. So the more positive you can be, the better.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So this is our take-home message. It's a Jim Carrey quote, and he gave this at a college graduation. It says, "When I say life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. I really don't know if that's true. I'm just making a conscious choice to perceive challenges as something beneficial so that I can deal with them in the most productive way." And I think the key part of this quote is he's making a conscious choice to just perceive life a little bit differently. Those that feel like they're the victim or, they're just unlucky in life tend to attract more unluckiness. But the more you could view that as, you know what, this is happening for me as opposed to me, it'll make you an even better person, a better teammate, and you'll see the good in things a little bit more too. And this is our information. Those are some of the teams and people we work with. Please follow us on Instagram, inspire.perform. We have a TikTok and a podcast. And then Lindsey and I include our emails on there as well. So we hope to hear from you guys.
Yeah, thanks for having us today.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for the great presentation. As any viewers are looking, please take the time out to visit these platforms and shoot emails to them if you have any questions. Once again, it's been another exciting edition of Human Sports Performance. I'm your host, Anthony Smalls, and we will see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.